It was towards the end of my sophomore year of college. I started to become depressed. Of course, I didn't really do anything about it at the time. That would be another year's off. But I'd be surrounded by my friends, and I don't know, I just couldn't help but feel like I wasn't really there. Felt like I was further away than I should have been. And, as you can probably tell from this series, I tried to turn that into a video game. So the game ended up being codenamed Safe, which was short for Sausage Fest because, well, we were all guys. We had some girlfriends, but they didn't really get to hang out with them as much because we didn't live in the same dorm anymore. Started off as a pretty basic RPG. You had a silent protagonist, which was supposed to be the audience surrogate or the player character. And everyone else was me and my friends. And the protagonist couldn't speak because his neck got injured when we all got transported into some alternate dimension where we had to like fight monsters or something. And we didn't realize that we could heal yet. So we couldn't really do anything about it, and so that's why you couldn't talk. Originally, we would fight with weapons that were pretty basic. There were like some kind of weapon with a elemental property. So like a fire sword, the storm hammer, the energizer totem, which was my weapon because it's the coolest. It basically created other weapons out of energy. It's a concept I like a lot and will come up later in a future episode. The debuff pistols. Couldn't really think of anything else. And combat would be extremely active. Everyone had an active time gauge, kind of like Final Fantasy, but all the skills were based around units of time. So more like a 13's combat, but instead of it being separated into gauges, it was just like you get pushed back down on your timeline, and then you get to act again later, and like weaker attacks cost less time to do, and stronger attacks cost more time. And so the whole game was just trying to balance your time units. There's like this tiny RPG that I know came out for the PS Vita, but I can't think of its name, and I don't know what I'd even look for it, but it took place in the Old West, and it had a very similar gameplay setup. But later on, I started reading JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I decided to make everyone's abilities stands. And while they wouldn't have physical humanoid representations, they basically function the same. And they'd all be named after other video games. So for my starter skill, because we ended up getting like 2 or 3, mine was a Deus Ex, and basically my arm would be robotic, and it would let me reach into like a secret backpack to pull out items, and then later like guns. Others include, I think, Guild Wars, which would let him summon an army of dudes. I know Bioshock was one, and that was basically just lightning. The hero, I forgot, his basic weapon was the Void Sword. And by Void, I mean, like, coding Void, so all of his effects were ASCII. And that basically stayed the same. I think I got renamed to Soul Calibur. I think one was called Magica. And let the guy basically have magic abilities, or he did have, that guy also had time splitters, which let him stop time and have time-based powers, so that was pretty cool. Well, I mean, it would have been. One guy had Metal Gear, which actually took, which are these giant metal wings, because they're also Legend Dragoon. And he got to, like, shoot lasers off of them. One character could summon a bear that he punched people with, and it had a bonus damage against women, and it was a reference to the Wicker Man. The guy with the fire sword turned into just being able to breathe fire. Now, the gameplay would go about, there's like a hub world, and we'd get to go into different areas, sometimes multiple times, and complete different missions, and that would give you a different, like, variation on your weapon. Or at least a different variation of the type of gun you had. Or a variation on the, like, your combat abilities. And so it was less about having bigger numbers and more about customizing yourself. Kind of like in Bioshock Infinite, where you'd have those different gear pieces that would give you bonuses. That's also a system I liked and will come up in a later video. But you had to be mindful of the order you did these missions in, because some of them would end up killing off one of your characters. Because I was depressed, I thought it'd be funny and would enforce the concept of high stakes, that if all the characters died mid-storyline, so to make players feel like at any moment they could lose a character. And by the time you get down to 4, which is the maximum party size, then you're kind of just, you're kind of like at a bottleneck, because your last 4 guys will always be the same, and then you go on like then the game gets linear. And the game is built around having only 4 players left. Fortunately enough for you, your character has the ability to use other characters' abilities, so you can't feel too bad about losing them. I forget what that one was called. But of course the way everyone died was kind of funny. Like, one guy gets shot by a SWAT team, because his abilities always have the longest charge time, so he wouldn't be able to fast enough to dodge the bullets. One guy gets stabbed by like a bunch of children because his in-game abilities are single target focused. One guy gets quartered by this one boss that can multiply himself, and he just pulls them apart. And eventually you get down to just the last 4 members, being the player character, my character because I'm the item guy, the magic guy who can stop time, and the healer guy with the bear. But then the healer guy with the bear gets eaten by a giant vagina monster. We were really into teeth at the time. And then we come across the final villain of the game, like the main story mode, and for whatever reason, the 3 big villains are like based off of 3 vices: sex, drugs, and alcohol. The sex lady turns into said vagina monster. Drugs is like some drug addict guy who turns into his horde of zombies, but we deal with him. And the alcohol guy is basically an abusive father. And he ends up killing the magic guy because he's immune to time stop powers because he's a boss and he's immune to all the good status effects. So that's just the player character in me. And then I get injured in some kind of fight. And while I'm dying, I'm revealing that I've been the one that's been killing off everybody because I don't believe that we deserve to win and survive and I guess stop the aliens from attacking Earth or something. Did I mention that we were kidnapped by aliens and they're testing humanity by putting us through this? And since I was depressed at the time, I was like, nah, it's hopeless, what's the point? And then I revealed that I was able to manipulate events that led all of us into death with my secret third power, Final Fantasy. And I'm like, this was my Final Fantasy, and then like flesh just corrodes, and then I'm a skeleton which dusts and blows off into the wind off this cliff. And it's like so meta. Because it's me killing off all the virtual representation of my friends in a game where my virtual representation is killing off all the friends. It makes sense if you think about it. Which leads the player character to have to fight the final boss by himself. And he wins, because he can use all the powers at this point. And then I guess you face off against this alien council. And then you have to decide whether or not people are like worth fighting for, because I don't really make anything look pretty because people are jerks and everything's kind of like pointless. Because I mean, I was depressed when I made this or conceptualized this, so everything's pretty grim, but if the player character still feels optimistic, they can get a good ending. Of course, if you prove that humans are worth fighting for, that means the aliens will attack Earth. Which is kind of a joke. Because if you make humans seem really pointless and not worth it, the aliens will be like, yeah, let's just leave them, and then they'll leave. And let's resolve the problem. So I guess it's like Digital Devil Saga. Except it doesn't just screw you over at that ending in Volume 2. My cat doesn't show up in the middle of it.